So the Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer beta has officially concluded, with our next ability to play Modern Warfare 3 being on the 2nd for the campaign early access. So bright side, I guess, we're only a few weeks away from that if you enjoyed it, but there's still downtime that if you're looking to play COD still, Modern Warfare 2 may be a jarring experience and a change of pace going from the Modern Warfare 3 beta back to Modern Warfare 2. But that said, countless hours under my belt and grinding out a stockpile of footage here for videos until release, how do I feel about the Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer beta? Today we're running down my honest review of the beta, the feedback I have, and hopes for changes of the future and everything in between. So as we go along, drop your thoughts down below. What did you think of the beta? Like it, dislike it, impartial? Whatever the case, feel free to share. But let's keep it civil, shall we? Things like this are always subjective. Some people will share or not share your opinions, but everyone's entitled to their own. No one's right or wrong. It's all subjective again. But I would like to hear your thoughts on it. If you enjoyed the video, you find it at all insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing to stay up to date with all things Modern Warfare 3 as we gear up for launch here in the coming weeks and everything to come beyond. I'd love to have in the community. Finally, check out my friends over at Gamer Advantage. Today, they just released their new slave frames with a 15% discount on those, but code Espresso stacks to give you 25% off, which is actually the highest discount we've seen since the new year, but more on that later. For now, let's jump into my thoughts on the beta. First, as a preface, again, this is entirely subjective. This is based off of my experience with the beta, and it shouldn't be any sort of nullification of your own experiences. If you enjoyed it, great, happy you did. But if you didn't, I hope they can make those changes that you see fit to make the game enjoyable for you. End of the day, games are meant to be fun after all. And I'll also start with what I said at COD Next. This game isn't Modern Warfare 2, so if you know me, you've seen the channel here the last year, it's a right start in my opinion. There are absolutely some good, absolutely some bad for this beta, and I want to touch on all that. Overall, personally, right up front, I did enjoy the beta, which based off of how I felt this past year, like I almost feel guilty for enjoying, which is weird, but don't get that misunderstood where if the full launch is awful or anything in the post-launch seasons I don't like, I'm still going to voice my dissatisfaction as I have almost this entire past year with Modern Warfare 2. That's not going to change. But anyways, let's jump into it, good and bad. Firstly, I want to start with the good here. I want to start with a point that probably not a lot of people will start with in their sort of positives for the beta, and it may be a controversial one, but I kind of like how the way the perks were formatted. It's not my favorite system, I'll say that fully up front. It's not my favorite overall, but I like it way more than I thought I would, and also I like it way more than obviously what we had with Modern Warfare 2 with the timed rollout of bonus and ultimate perks. You have 3 perks immediately most times, and then a class vest, if you want to call it that, which is essentially a 4th perk right off the bat. And I also like it because it's a unique spin on the classics. And I say that because, I mean, I might get in trouble for saying this, but Pick 10, from what I had heard, was initially going to be the system in place throughout development, and then got shut down a couple of months back by, well, who do you think shut down all the player-friendly choices in the last year and a half? But to have to remake your entire basis of create a class on such short notice, I do think it's a cool way to introduce an air quote new way to manage create a class while having the inspiration from other locations. So while it's not that perfect one, it's better than I thought it would be. Next, another smaller detail that I noticed here just kind of reviewing footage is that kill cams actually show accurate perks and equipment again. That's something that's been broken since Modern Warfare 2's launch, and I still think is, if I'm not mistaken. Like, the bonus and ultimate perks don't show up in that kill cam, so you can't tell if somebody has ghost most of the time unless they fixed that recently. Hadn't paid attention. I just know that like season 3, season 4, even season 5, it was broken to a degree. So if season 6 has changed that, well, cool, that's great, but it took way too long to fix. Obviously, we can get into things like the maps, the classics being back. I had a surprising amount of fun for playing maps that were 14 years old. And honestly, it kind of aged me because I definitely, of course, know all the flow, all the stuff like that from playing in the original Modern Warfare 2, but there were a ton of people that did not know those maps too well in my matches. And like, that's totally fine, but like, God, getting old, man. 14 years old for these maps. I totally understand that there's a lot of players that have come to the franchise in the last 14 years, but that makes me feel old, man. Anyways, movement, honestly, I thought was great. Chef's kiss for that kind of stuff. I'm not any sort of movement demon, but I also didn't like how slow and dumbed down the pace was for Modern Warfare 2. I get the argument that's still out there for like the movement demons that still want to get that 100 millisecond delay of what is still persisting in the sprint out time after a slide. To get that removed, I get that that can be annoying, but for a washed gamer like myself, I don't really notice it all that much and still can use that slide cancel accordingly just fine. So again, that's where it comes down to the subjective nature of it. I would be totally fine fine if they remove it and they allow for that instant sprint out as you had in Modern Warfare 2019, but also I'm kind of fine either way. Red dots on the minimap, obviously that's one that is a big talking point as well. I personally don't understand why it was ever taken away, why Infinity Ward tried to, and I quote, not punish players for firing their weapon. I mean, that's the risk you take whenever you engage in a gunfight. That's the reason you have suppressors and muzzles that will hide that from minimap. I mean, that's the entire purpose of half those attachments there. So to be able to have that, to understand where the flow of the map can be going just from gauging where those gunfights are, to be able to see that information on your minimap, it's definitely nice, I think, and love to have that back. Again, that's a core staple of Call of Duty. It feels weird sort of air quote praising it for coming back because it should have never left, but it is what it is. Map voting, honestly, a massive W, I think, in my opinion. I'd love to see lobbies no longer disband, but I don't think that's really going to happen. I think that would really make the map voting system very worthwhile by comparison, but I don't think that they're going to actually remove that. Ground War was a blast to play. I will say that the one big thing, though, in regards to Ground War, there was a lot of dev errors, a lot of crashing, especially on pop-off power. That was the map I noticed it most on. I think it crashed once, maybe twice on Orlov military base. So fingers crossed that gets ironed out here for the full launch, but the overall flow and the map itself, I had a good time with both those, and the Ground War experience I really enjoyed as well. Also, XP on there was pretty good, so if you guys want to grind something out, might be a good way to start at launch. But anyways, that's Ground War. Gunplay as a whole, I enjoyed. There's a couple of subsections I want to touch on, like the TTK was fine for me. Sure, there were the odd how did I didn't kill him moments, but like, I think that's just me getting used to higher TTK again and having to hit those 1 or 2 extra shots that I wouldn't have to normally. I think that higher TTK like this rewards more accurate shots. Again, feel free to disagree. That's totally fine. And I do understand the argument where, okay, you can't take out 2 to 3 people as you could normally, but I feel like you can counter that with the same argument that people tried to make last year of, oh, just be tactical. Yeah, don't take a 1v2 gunfight, 1v3 gunfight if you want to try and take them all out. I feel like that's more tactical in how you take those engagements rather than post up and play the air quote tactical game. That's just me and maybe differences of opinions in how gameplay works out. I love the headshot notifier audio. I think that's one of the things that the most recent COD games have absolutely nailed. Honestly, I think probably all COD games nail the headshot sound. Reload canceling, such a lifesaver. Really happy to have that back in terms of gunplay. So the overall gunplay, I enjoyed quite a bit. Audio and audio variance was something that I really enjoyed as well. I could hear footsteps perfectly, but it also wasn't a sort of crutch thing where you had to listen to end up getting kills. The bone conduction headset gave awareness, which was definitely nice if you wanted to hear more, but oppositely, you had the counter of the covert sneakers for dead silence. I wasn't hearing footsteps on everything, but those that didn't have covert sneakers, I could hear them, which was definitely nice. So it gave that agency to the player, not limiting them to how they had to play, but also giving the options to expand that play, if that makes sense. So I like that a lot. One really minor thing that I didn't even know if people caught, but it's great for gameplay pacing that I really enjoyed, is that Sledge already removed the fly-in sequence for certain game modes that acted as a sort of buffer or like a respawn delay. Weekend 1 of Hardpoint, for example, you had that fly-in animation where it took those extra 2 to 3 seconds to get back into the action. You now no longer had that in Weekend 2, so keeps that pace of play up, keeps it higher, which is definitely nice. And then finally, visual recoil was something that I think was way more tame by comparison to Modern Warfare 2, and even Vanguard, where you had nowhere near the muzzle flash and smoke that you had, nor bounce that you saw in both of those as well. So that should be something that helps the gameplay experience overall. But that said, that's the stuff that I enjoyed, but let's talk about the stuff that I didn't, because there still is quite a bit here that I think we can expand upon. First, hit registry was poor at times, horrible at others, and that's something that I do think needs to be ironed out. I don't really know what to say to really expand further on that, but there were absolutely times where just hit registry just wasn't it. Spawns, well, that's also something that need a lot of work. There are a lot of scenarios where I'm just like, that spawn made 0 sense. And sure, yeah, you can look at things like Rust. Rust has always had chaotic spawns, but even there, they were exceptionally bad. There were points where I even spawned second story on the oil rig because they were so bad. I think Hardpoint probably was the worst spawns. Domination, I kind of thought was up there as well, because like, it seemed like even if you had that map control, there would still be those really, really random flips that would happen where nobody would either push up into a spawn spawn, but also, I mean, things like high rise, I was noticing that you could even push in those spawns and they were so sticky that you'd end up still spawning right in front of those enemies. That I think I noticed a lot on Kill Confirmed, and it's weird because I feel like TDM was the most stable spawns, which usually like those are the not most random, but like they don't have as many set parameters for how spawns work in the past. So spawns absolutely need some work on. That's something that I'd imagine that Sledge has more than enough data points now to analyze, okay, this doesn't make sense, we should adjust here for this game mode, here for this game mode, and elsewhere. I mean, that's one of those things with the beta that when you get millions of players playing it, it's going to give you way more data way faster than playing in-house for any set amount of time could. When you have probably a couple of hundred QA testers to play in-house and gather that data point, obviously adding a few zeros to that active player count at any given point for 4 to 5 days at a time for 2 weekends, you're gonna get way more data. But anyways, visibility I still think could be worked on. It was absolutely improved upon with the nameplates, but I still think there could be a little bit more done. And I don't know exactly what I would say should happen for that to work out. I mean, that's one of those things that it sounds kind of stupid because it's just like, fix this, but I also don't know what I would recommend to do so. What I will say would be interesting is that there is one of those leaked perks that did provide the outline that we mentioned before in our early play session back in August that slightly, not horribly, outlined the player in red for the enemies. So maybe that's another step towards better visibility for those that like, maybe I'm just getting older and I just can't spot stuff where other players don't have any issues with it, but like that could be something that's a correction to like air quote user error in that sense, where it offers the ability for even further adjustments for visibility, but comes at the cost of a perk. So we'll see how that works out. Graphically, I still think that some texture packs may be missing, or at least I hope they are, because while I think the game does look decent on PC on a super high-end rig, it's also something that I think could have a lot more detail in areas, and some parts of maps, some parts of weapons kind of like felt they weren't complete, but we'll see how that works out. I noticed quite a bit of packet bursting on PC, which I did not on PlayStation 5, on Xbox Series X when I did those tests for consoles. And for reference, all of my stuff is hardwired, all my consoles, my PC, all on a near gigabit connection. So like that stuff should not be an issue in regards to any sort of connection issues, but I noticed a ton of packet bursting on PC more so than anything else. And that might just be a continuation because I noticed that in Warzone and Modern Warfare 2 where there's packet bursting, which is weird. But anyways, that's something that hopefully gets fixed out. Streaks in the beta were pretty lackluster, if I'm honest with you. And I'm really surprised they gave us the boring ones. Again, there were some more at our pre-reveal event that we ended up getting hands on in August that I remember were cooler and more fun to use. I think there was a chopper gunner in that build. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the other one, so I don't want to say anything and just like kind of put it out there just in case it's wrong. But I'm also disappointed that we couldn't wrap streaks here at this. I want to get more than one UAV in a life. If I'm going for a nuke streak, I'm usually running that UAV counter UAV and what would be an advanced UAV. I'd love to be able to have multiple of those if I end up having the ability to wrap those in score streaks. So fingers crossed that's something that changes, but I mean, based off of the last 3 of 4 games, that isn't something that's going to happen. And the only game that allowed you to wrap streaks was Cold War, and that had a stupid cooldown on streaks, which I didn't like at all. Weapon balancing absolutely needs some work. I was not a fan of the snipers being rifles with one-shot potential. That might just be me again being a salty gamer, but I mean, it felt weird, right? Like, I mean, to have a sniper that could one-shot, but also base 25 rounds with the potential to max out everything for ADS and not lose any sort of damage potential. So that was one thing that I was not a huge fan of. Again, maybe that's just my boomer gamer moment, but the striker in the MCW easy mode for sure. Was a little bummed we didn't get to see those knock down a peg so that you could end up using more weapons viably. Like, it was probably 5 guns or so that I ended up using. One of the snipers, striker, the MCW, the Pulemyot, that LMG, and then the Bass B. Those were the only weapons I really used because everything else kind of paled in comparison in terms of power. Also, some of the experiences I felt like were off because their abilities are going to be the full game and not the beta. Like, I absolutely thought, like, multiple times throughout the beta, I was like, this is something where I feel like health regen's taking a little too long. But there's going to be a quick fix perk at launch. There's going to be a faster reload or sleight of hand perk at launch as well. So that kind of stuff is going to be in there, but kind of deterred a little bit from the gameplay experience of not having that right now. Teammate footstep audio, I definitely think needs to be adjusted. Lowered or at least level with footstep audio for enemies overall. Like, they're all equal, or bring it down below enemy footstep audio. I said it before that I was in engagements where I'd be looking at a gunfight, but then I'd hear this footstep audio, get ready for a gunfight, and it's just Jeff on my team who got a spawn when they flipped. But his footsteps were so loud, I'm not paying attention to the minimap. I'm looking at a gunfight that could turn to me at any moment that I didn't notice his dot pop up on the minimap. So it gives you that scare that if you turn around, sometimes that'll get you shot in the back the moment that COD timing kicks in. So that stuff, I really do hope we get some different audio mixes with that kind of stuff. Skill-based matchmaking or retention-based matchmaking is something that I don't really want to focus too much on because it's not going to go away. I'm not really one to complain about this kind of stuff because it's just not going to change. Normally, I'm just like, it's whatever. I accept my fate, gonna have to sweat out. It's okay. I can do that. I'd prefer not to all the time, but I'm okay with it. But I talked about how when you play normally in full parties, you can usually brute force matchmaking, which my squad ended up doing recently. Like we went running through lobbies, but then as time progressed, we only played teams of 4, 5, and 6-man parties that I'd wager were trying way harder than myself, or at least for kill potential. Objectively, we still beat them because there were games where just nobody touched domination flag or hardpoint. And like, I don't really care. Again, I'll sweat out whatever, but the consistency at which we got those was kind of wild. Again, it kind of threw that theory of brute force out the window. And the crazier part to me is that we consistently got those 4, 5, and 6-man teams at 2 to 3 a.m. on a Sunday evening. So to reiterate, again, don't care, especially in a beta when my gameplay experience means nothing to the full launch version. But it was just wild that every single game was ramping up consecutively like that with no reprieve at all. Just as an observation. Again, don't really compare, it's just wild by comparison. My only real hope that I actually do care about with skill-based or retention-based matchmaking is that when it comes to the camo grind, I'd like to see it be a bit more reactive to recent games. Like in the past, I've had so many times where I'm working on pistols, working on launchers, and I'm going up against people that are slide canceling, bunny hopping, drop shotting, jump shotting, all using only the meta weapons. And it's just like, bro, I've been -20 the last 5 games in a row. Throw me a bow in matchmaking and then it just doesn't. So I'd like to see that kind of stuff, like at least recognize, hey, you're not really trying that hard. But that's the only thing that I'd say about that, like personally speaking. It wasn't in the beta, but it will be there at launch. I'm not a fan of weapon tuning coming back. I just think that things would be so much simpler without that. But that is the negatives that I disliked out of the beta. But here's my thing. One thing that isn't necessarily beta related, but Modern Warfare 3 related, I think the biggest hurdle that this thing has in the air quote bad category per se is just the nature of the game itself. A very close updated copy of Modern Warfare 2. I said it already, I did genuinely enjoy my time on the beta, and from what I said from my first ability to talk about it once our embargo was up, this is the game that I think we should have had the entire past year. Is that game for everyone? Absolutely not. I'm sure there are people that hate this, and that's entirely fine. You're more than welcome to that opinion, but when I tell you that the changes we played with this beta compared to Modern Warfare 2, it's like they read off the list of feedback that we gave Infinity Ward last year. I said it before, for more of a glimpse behind the curtain of content creation and these sort of briefings that sometimes myself, other creators, and press will have with developers, last February for Storytime, coming out of Season 1's disastrous management of Warzone Caldera's update and launch, Raven kind of went on this apology tour, and for the record, I do think that while Caldera wasn't my favorite map, I think some of the quality of life changes that we saw from Raven from then on were some of the best changes we saw to Warzone overall. But on that initial call in February, a studio executive at Infinity Ward, who I won't name, came on, and by talking about the future of Warzone, they initially had to confirm Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2. So from that day in February of 2022, months before Modern Warfare 2 was ever officially revealed, they asked for feedback for how they could make Modern Warfare 2 the best game they possibly could, that they wanted to make it with all players in mind, and it sounded like they really wanted to build upon and learn from what did and didn't work in Modern Warfare 2019. And fast forward to COD Next, that feedback and suggestions that players had given them for like 7 months until that point, I am not even kidding when I say all of those points were entirely disregarded. Like, I don't want to sound entitled because I know myself and others, we're just singular players and the millions that play Call of Duty. But like, why even ask? Why on multiple occasions field any sort of feedback if it's going directly from our figurative hands exchanging that list into the trash? Like, that's almost insulting at that point. So while the game itself, the biggest counter is, well, how is this not a DLC? I'm not going to lie. I do think that that's a very valid question. Personally, I see it as other games of the past. You had COD 4 and World at War, 2 identical games in gameplay build, essentially the same game. Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3 in 2009 and 2011, the originals were very similar. Yes, they had different things like kill streaks, and then you had the point streak system. You had specialists introduced and other stuff like that. Some more modernizations and innovation into that, but fundamentally very similar in build. Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare, essentially the same game. They offered up a bit more fluidity in that motion, I think, with Infinite Warfare, a bit more choice in regards to the combat rigs, as they called them, as opposed to specialists. But again, essentially the same game. Where I think this one hits home and is harder to distinguish is that it's two back-to-back Modern Warfare games, a direct sequel for the first time in COD history. So that feeling of nothing's changed is ever more present than those times in the past where you had a year or two to distinguish what those changes were, and changes in setting where otherwise they weren't. So should you pay $70 for what could have been, as some people put it, a free update to Modern Warfare 2? That's entirely up to you. I cannot and don't like to ever say do this with your money because it's literally not my place. My only goal with these kind of reviews and the information we talk about on the channel is to share my personal experience with you and give you as much information as possible so that you can make an informed, educated decision of your own. If you enjoyed Modern Warfare 2 and you're not a fan of what happened with this beta, I think it's a no-brainer for you one way that you probably shouldn't buy Modern Warfare 3. But if you enjoy the beta, you like the movement, more of, I guess, the mostly directly comparable stuff is like a mix of Modern Warfare 2019 and Vanguard, then you'll probably like this experience. If you want to wait and just play Warzone, that's your big thing, you can probably do that too, and you don't have to pay for it. That's going to be a free update with Season 1 in December anyway. So what I will say is this could have been an update thing boils down to a studio and their unwillingness to make any changes or even handle their own Year 2 content if those initial rumors all the way back before Modern Warfare 2 was revealed were true to any degree. One studio is willing to make a change, another one, not at all. So that really is, I think, the basis here of all of this. Do I think that this could have been an update for free for Modern Warfare 2? Well, sure, in a perfect world, yeah, whenever a publisher isn't trying to gain even more money, because let's be real, they were going to charge at some point anyway. Activision's not going to give up a free $1 billion every single year, and Infinity Ward wasn't ever going to concede that, oh, maybe our gameplay choices weren't the best decision here at that. They haven't in the past, they weren't going to back down now, so that is what it is, man. I mean, in a perfect world, yes, absolutely could have been a free DLC, but it's not a perfect world. So please do not take this as me trying to sway you one way or the other, but that's just the way that I see it, and that's where my head's personally at with it, where, yeah, it does suck. We got to pay another $70 for the game we should have had this past year, but if you take Modern Warfare 2 out of the equation entirely, this I had fun with, and it was the game that I had asked for since February of 2022. So that is where I'm at. That's my beta review here and what we had with Modern Warfare 3's multiplayer beta, and that, I think, is what we're gonna call it. Before we wrap everything up, again, make sure to check out my friends over at Gamer Advantage. Their new Slave frames are releasing with a 15% discount. New frames, they look pretty good in my opinion. Can't wait for mine to get in here. But also code Espresso Stacks to give you an additional 10% off, giving you 25% off your entire order if you guys want to check those out. That's the highest we've seen since 2023 began, if I'm not mistaken. So if you guys want to check that out, link in the description below, but that is what we're gonna call it. So let me know your thoughts down below. What do you guys think here of Modern Warfare 3's beta? Did you enjoy it? Not so much? Whatever the case, drop your thoughts. But if you enjoyed the video, you find it out insightful, do me a favor and drop a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing to stay updated with all things Modern Warfare 3 as we gear up for the launch here in just a couple of weeks now. I'd love to have in the community. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Mine's been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.